Hello, everybody. Welcome to our engineering session. It's a breakout session with the CTE mini conference hosted by NAF, National Academy Foundation Schools. We're so excited to have you here. We have a PLTW, a Project Lead the Way pathway that is at NAF. And so we knew that we needed to get a bunch of high quality engineers. We're so excited for who we have. We have a couple of representatives from Northrop Grumman who are also graduates of Baltimore City Schools. So we're so excited to learn about their journeys and how they ended up where they are. And then we have a couple of civil engineers, transportation engineers that are going to be talking us because there's so many different ways to be an engineer. So we're excited to help students see all the possibilities that are ahead of them. Mr. Ndati, can you say a few words since you are the whole reason this entire event is happening? Credit where credit is due. Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much, Barbara, for coming to our school to do this wonderful presentation to our students. I also want to thank the panel for coming over and share their experiences and just motivate our students to understand what this pathway is all about. And for the students who are here, again, thank you for coming. And I hope you'll learn a ton of things, and a lot of the things that they'll talk about will help you make some of the decisions. I know some of you guys are interested in engineering and or not sure what you want to do. And I hope you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. One of the most important thing is, if you don't know, if you don't understand, please always ask questions, and you never know what opportunities can come out of it, or just to make you understand a bigger picture of where exactly you want to go. All right. So again, once again, thank you for the panel. And again, my name is Mr. Ndati. I've been teaching Project Lead the Way this is my 12th year. I was at a Friendship Academy of Engineering and Technology, and now I've been here now for the last 3 years. And I hope our students will gain a lot from this. And please, if you would like to leave your contacts also for students to follow up, I will think that will be very helpful. So thank you very much, Bob. And sorry, before I leave, Bob, I send you a text. I know I saw a lot of my students who are still on the first session because this could not work. Could Ms. Adenike make an announcement so that they can cross over? Because I know we have a lot of students who are still in the main session there.
Great idea. That is a great idea. I will text her right this second.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. While I'm doing that, if we could, let's start with Northrop Grumman. So we've got two former graduates of Baltimore City Public Schools, proud graduates of Baltimore City Public Schools that also now work at Northrop Grumman. So Morgan and Elwood, would you introduce yourselves? It doesn't matter who goes first, but whoever goes first, I have an additional task for you. You have to tell us, what's Northrop Grumman? That's a weird name. What do they do? Where are they? So whoever thinks they're up for that challenge, they should introduce themselves first. Oh, I heard Elwood, he unmuted. I see you laughing. That means you volunteered, right?
Okay, sure. Sure. Okay, so once again, my name is Elwood Lane. I'm a graduate of Baltimore Polytechnic Institute. A bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Howard University and a master's degree in electrical and computer engineering from Johns Hopkins. And I work at Northrop Grumman as a chief engineer, and I've been here at Northrop Grumman for the last 8 years. So Northrop Grumman is a aerospace and defense company. We make many products serving as a defense contractor. We're on the Fortune 100 list, and we do a lot to serve the community as well, and as well as our aspects of our full business nature. That is it.
And what is well, first of all, you might want to tell them, because I happen to know that you're at a location that made it kind of tough for you to actually communicate, because there's some top secret things that, we can't know about. But what can you tell us about your work?
So my personal work, my day-to-day responsibility. Okay, so I'm in the system product leadership group, where I work with customers as they integrate technology into their platforms. So that involves putting together proposals, managing budgets, putting together schedules, tracking costs, helping and just overall helping customers to execute on their programs. That's basically what I do at this point. So.
Great, thank you so much. Morgan, why don't you give us a sense of all the different ways you can be an engineer at Northrop Grumman?
So I'm actually going to tackle your first question too. So Northrop Grumman, as Elwood said, is a defense contractor for different government agencies. So we do stuff for the Navy, for the Army, just all the branches of the government. And specifically, we do things with sonar, radar, some ground vehicles. There's actually a location in Annapolis that does like submerged water systems, which I thought was really cool. So if you're interested in doing anything engineering related, there's definitely things that Northrop kind of has little small areas for. One of the things that I work on specifically, I'm a manufacturing engineer, and currently I'm actually in a rotational program. I think that's something that's very unique to Northrop Grumman. You're allowed to bounce around to different locations and different job opportunities to get as much experience as possible. But currently in my position as a manufacturing engineer, there's opportunities to do additive manufacturing, as well as different subject matter areas, such as brazing, which is something that I work on, which essentially is a big oven that we machine parts in that kind of weld them together in a very specific way. So there's definitely a lot that Northrop Grumman does. I think that it's a great, first job opportunity for anyone that's interested in the engineering field to kind of figure out what they like. And I think that was your first question. So what was the next one? I didn't introduce myself. So my name is Morgan Freeman. I went to Western High School, graduated back in 2014, and actually started going to Umbc to study mechanical engineering. I actually had a unique discipline concentration area at Umbc. I was more interested in biomedical engineering. So a lot of my research that I did at Umbc was to medical devices and medical equipment. I actually was in the Project Lead the Way program for biomedical sciences when I was at Western. So I am very familiar with Project Lead the Way. I'm really happy that they have the engineering one at NAF. They didn't offer that at Western at the time, but I'm happy that they have it in more Baltimore City schools. So now I'm here at Northrop Grumman. Actually, Elwood, working on pursuing my master's at Hopkins as well. So excited to start that next year.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. I am just going to remind students that if you want to put questions in the chat, you are able to do that throughout this entire time period. And then we can do it when we sort of come to a natural break as our speakers are introducing themselves. And then we will also have time towards the end for sort of a general session. I don't see any questions in the chat yet. Mr. Ndati, did you have any specific questions? I always have questions. So I let other people go first because I could question for days.
Yeah, so before I answer that, my students came up with some questions yesterday. So I'm just gonna copy them and post them here, and you guys can just answer them as you deem fit. Okay. So just give me a second, I'm gonna copy all of them.
Okay, well then I'll ask my question. I'll buy you some time. Morgan, I'm curious because we know that in engineering, there's not, women are underrepresented in engineering. So I'm curious if there was a mentor or there was a teacher that really saw something in you and was like, you know what you need to do. I'm curious because we know that matters a lot,
So absolutely. I've actually had several mentors over the course of, even back to maybe middle school. And I still have a long list of mentors even now. So I think that some of the most influential mentors that I had a mentor in who was actually a teacher at Western, who kind of really helped pour into my interest in engineering and actually combining that with the medical background that I was interested in at the time. So he actually got me very, very well equipped to handle things at a college level. And then also when I was in high school, I actually did a program at Northrop Grumman called HIP, which is called the High School Involvement Program. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that at NAF, but if not, I could definitely try to, make that connection happen. But what that program is you get a mentor that you are paired up with for the school year at Northrop Grumman, and you work on an engineering project. I know they've changed the format around a little bit, but I actually had 2 female mentors when I was doing that program. So they were largely influential to, preparing me for that experience and preparing me to get into to college. And then also in college, I'm sure you've heard of, SWE is a big thing. It's the Society for Women Engineers. So SWE has different branches at the high school level, the college level. So hopefully that's another avenue in which we can pair up some of these students with, people at a higher level that can kind of, help to bridge that connection. And please use me as a resource now as well. And I definitely will give you my contact information so that if any students are, specifically interested in engineering in general, I could help support them moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morgan. We'll definitely follow up with you to figure out what kinds of mentorship programs like that already exist and which ones we could support bringing online. That's amazing. That's a really generous offer. Thank you. Elwood, do you want to speak to mentorship and speak to the support or the guidance you had? Because again, sometimes it's hard to envision what engineering is, and it can be really helpful to have somebody.
Sure. So, so I was also in the high school involvement partnership at Northrop Grumman in high school. I didn't mention that I did that back in 2007, approximately 2007 to 2009. And so that really helped me decide that I wanted to be an engineer in general to start. And then along the way, I maintained a lot of relationships from that program, and which really helped me to navigate into, like, I had an internship at Northrop in my junior year at Howard. And even during my time at Northrop, mentorship is really huge because it's a lot to know what you want to do, right? I mean, engineering is wide. Like even at Northrop, the role that I'm in is getting even more specialized as I go. And so you really want somebody to be able to help you navigate that. Like I said, Northrop Grumman is a billion-dollar company, and just like Morgan mentioned, we have a ton of different business areas that we support. Like I personally support something called secure processing, but underneath of the SIMS, which is a cyber group. And so, but there's just a ton of things in a ton of different areas, and there's no way you can navigate that by yourself. You want mentors to show you that. You want mentors to help identify the specific path or role you want to take. And you also want a mentor to help you to know how to be successful, right? So not only do you want that path, but you want to be successful in whatever role that you decide to choose. So mentors are crucial. I always tell people, not just engineer anything. Mentors are the way for you to make sure that you're successful in life. So.
Awesome. I think just like a practical question, it can feel a little like how do you, like, let's say that there's somebody who you admire in your work and you want to learn more from them. Like, what's a way that a student might engage with, or you've got just you're an employee and you can see somebody else has figured it out. What recommendations would you make about how to engage with that person so that they can start to mentor you?
So I would say that the best mentorship is probably informal mentorship because that shows that two sides are both strongly interested in mentoring somebody else. So I would say just getting out there and attempting to establish a relationship, try to spark a connection, try to find something that, like I said, if you're a potential mentee, that the mentor will be interested in, and then mentor wanting to find somebody to help. It's just finding that common interest, and if you can find that common interest, I think the mentorship relationship will really work out. So that's.
Thank you. That's good advice. I think it can be, it's a learned skill, right? It's not something we necessarily know how to do. So thinking like, okay, well, we have this in common, and then like following that to an informal mentorship. Thanks for that insight. All right, we're going to pivot a little bit. We're going to shift from mechanical and manufacturing engineering over to transportation and civil engineering. So same thing as before. I would love if Adam Greenstein and Pushkar Kaur could give us a little bit of an overview for students, like begin to think about like, okay, what does engineering look like in this field? That would be really great. I'd also like to invite Morgan and Elwood, that there's now questions in the chat that Mr. Ndadi posted there. So after we hear from our other engineers, we'll circle back to those questions. We won't have an opportunity to get to all of them. So you might choose the question that you want to answer based on your interest and your experience. So you could take a look there. Pushkar, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I am Pushkar Kaur. I work for a consulting engineering company in Timonium, and its name is ATCS. I'm a senior project manager with them. I work on various transportation engineering projects, especially like highway traffic engineering type projects. I've been working since 19 years. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in civil engineering. And the other thing I want to say that, I have been fortunate to have a number of mentees over the years, both formally and informally mentor. So I'm glad to help out if anyone is interested in learning more about engineering. I remember when I was in high school, I had absolutely no clue what I was going to do whether I go to college and what do I study. My favorite subject was history in school. And obviously I'm an engineer now. And believe it or not, anything that you love doing, it comes around. Like some point in your career, you realize that, oh, a subject that I liked and loved in school, it actually gives you strength while you're working in your career. So that's all I would say for now. And I'm part of ITE, and Adam will talk more about that. ITE is an Institute of Transportation Engineers, and we actually, various ways we try to help out students to get into college. And so we have scholarships and other things. Of course, Adam will kind of elaborate more. So thank you.
I guess that's my cue. Just hand it right off.
Sure.
Again, my name is Adam Greenstein. Like Pushkar, I work for a civil engineering company in the Baltimore area, and the company's called WSP. It's a little on the larger side. It covers the whole entire country and several countries around the world outside of the United States. And the company covers anything related to infrastructure. So if you think about buildings or power systems, drainage, roadways, airports, trains, working on the actual train cars or the rail itself, environmental science, it covers literally anything where you can apply what you learn in school from math and science classes. And that is kind of how I figured out what engineering was. And like many people, when I was in middle school, high school, I had no idea what engineering was. And so I felt pretty comfortable with math and science classes, and I talked to my teachers, and even though they're math or science teachers, they said, oh, engineering is finding different ways to apply what you learn in math and science to real world applications to build things and make things move, and vehicles, and like I said, infrastructure, anything that you can really think of. And I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to join an engineering, almost like a mentoring or training program in high school, where I met engineering professors at local universities where I grew up, to talk to high school students about how you figure out what engineering is and whether or not you actually want to know whether or not you really think it's for you, because it is hard until you actually get into engineering classes or other trainings or anything related to transportation, specifically for me, what it really is. But my interest in engineering really goes back to when I was in elementary school. I was about 9 years old, and I idolized my grandfather when he was alive. He was an engineer. He graduated from Penn State in 1944 and joined the military as an engineer just as the war was finishing up. So he was recruited by the Army as an engineer to work on weapon systems. And when I was in elementary school, I had the chance to bring him into my class to talk to a group of 25 9-year-olds, basically boiling down to, I learned some math and science, I got hired by the military and got paid to make things that blow stuff up. And so all these 9-year-olds were like, how do I sign up to do math and science and make things explode? I'm in. And I felt the same way. So that he was my primary influence. He served as another mentor for me too, helping me understand how do I take what I learned in school and figure out what engineering really is. And then as I got older and I grew up outside of, or right down the street from a major shopping mall outside of the Philly area, and there's always this congestion and traffic and all these things going on. And I said, this is an absolute nightmare. People want to go shopping. People have things they want to buy. They want to hang out with their friends and family and socialize, but it takes them forever to get there. And I learned that there's a way to actually fix some of those problems. And that's in the transportation industry, whether it's going into actual engineering, if you want to pursue a path through college and get a degree, or you can be involved in transportation or civil engineering or things like that without actually going into engineering and be part of the impact that you have on your community. Everyone uses transportation every day. If you leave your home and you have to go somewhere, you're using transportation. So it's really something where I feel like it's so important and relatable and rewarding, because everything that we do on a daily basis in our jobs that Pushkar and I do has a direct impact on people we know. And that's where I feel like I get the most benefit out of it too.
Thank you so much. Because we started late, we're just sort of like adjusting our schedule, and I appreciate all of our speakers for their flexibility. So here's what I'd like to do. If all of our speakers can take a look in the chat, if you're able to do that, we've got some really great questions from our students. What is the best design you ever came up with? Or you could talk about like something you're really proud of in your work. How will engineers change the future? So there's some really fantastic questions in there if you don't mind taking a look. And then maybe choose one that you'd like to speak to. Adam, I think you'll have time to share your presentation on the next session, but I think we'll hold off on this session just so we can get some conversation with the students. And again, students, if you have additional questions, please put them in the chat.
So
Elwood, you got us?
sure, I'll try to answer one of the questions to start. So one of the questions is, in our class, we are told engineers work in a group. Who chooses the engineers to work on a project? All right. So I would say that here at Northrop Grumman, you find out that just in anything that's major or large, you just can't do it by yourself, right? And so I'll start there with group projects, and then typically people are chosen. So you have a project, let's say random, you want to build some satellite, right? So all of the different disciplines that are required on that project, those are laid out, and then you look at all of the available engineers and their skill sets and who can fill all of the necessary skill sets to build that satellite, and you put the team together. Sometimes personality traits are taken into account too, but majority, so it's both personality traits as well as skill set help decide who gets chosen for a given project. So.
Awesome, thank you. Any of our other speakers, Morgan, Adam, or Pushkar, like to speak to one of the questions?
So I can take question A. So the question is, what is the best design you've ever come up with / participated in? So as I mentioned, I'll reiterate again for the people that joined. But when I was in high school, I actually worked with Northrop with the internship program called HIP, which is the High School Involvement Partnership. So with that program, there's actually a different group in Baltimore called VME, which is Volunteer for Medical Engineers. So as I mentioned, I did Project Lead the Way for biomedical engineers. So my passion has always been like medical devices. So it's kind of like combining the engineering discipline to help people in a way that, is either a medical device or some sort of like prosthetic or something to that nature. So the project that I actually worked on with them, I've done 2 projects with VME, and one of them was my capstone project. So it was a bike for a girl that had a variety of different medical issues. Her leg on the left side was actually amputated from the knee down, and she also had hip dysplasia, which basically means that her hip was partially dislocated. So it limited her range of motion for pedaling. So she wasn't able to pedal like, someone typically would be able to pedal a bike. So our project was to design a bike that she could ride and get exercise with as an alternative to like a regular 2-wheel pedaling bike. So this was by far one of the most rewarding projects that I've ever done. It was me and 3 other people from Umbc that actually came together for this project, and we kept having to go back to her house, and we had to make consultations with her doctors and with her grandmother, who was her guardian, to kind of figure out a solution to get her to ride a bike. So it took the course of an entire semester, and we actually came up with the solution was a hand cranked bike. So she had kind of like foot braces that she would place her legs into, so her legs were stiff during it, but she would crank the front wheels with this hand crank that we designed. And it was fall semester, so we got to give it to her actually right before Christmas. And just to see like her face light up when we gave her the bike it was just unexplainable. So that was just one example of how much engineering solutions can really impact people's lives and really make a difference. And actually, Adam and Pushkar kind of touched on this, but if you're really passionate about something, you find ways to do it. And Northrop Grumman doesn't necessarily do biomedical things, but a lot of people on my team know that that's where my interests are, and even just like volunteering my time with things like that, people like kind of come to me with projects like, oh, you can work on this with us, or like, here's this, this thing that we think might be interesting to you. So definitely engineering can really change people's lives. And if you're passionate about something, just go for it, regardless of if you get paid for it. If you get paid for it, that's a bonus, but find ways to pursue your passion for sure.
Awesome. That sounds like a really meaningful project that you got to work in. That's amazing. Adam or Pushkar, were you able to take a look at some of the questions? And is there one in particular you'd like to speak to?
The one that I noticed that I think is a really good question is question C, how will engineers change the future? And from a transportation perspective, where my focus is studying traffic patterns, say for example, we have an intersection in the city and there's residents in that neighborhood who complain to the city Department of Transportation. There's people going too fast. There's people walking in the neighborhood and the traffic's going too fast and pedestrians might get hurt. People on their bicycles might get hurt. We need to find a way to make traffic slow down, make it safer, make it easier for everyone to get around. So you're thinking that's an immediate need, right? We're looking at the data as it's happening. We go out to that intersection and take photos and measure things to see what's out there right now. Then we use a lot of innovative tools and different methods to come up with ideas of how to make that intersection safer, make traffic more efficient, make it better for everyone in the community. Still meeting that immediate need, right? But we can't just put something out there that we think, oh, okay, it's fine for now based on the data that we found of what's happening in the past or what's happening currently. The look of that intersection needs to meet the demands for people 20, 30, 40 years from now, or at least to a certain extent. So we look at different types of data of projecting what traffic might look like in the future, or how a neighborhood might look in 10 or 15 years, or what it's going to look like in 5 years, and consider how do we make that intersection designed properly to handle potential changes in the neighborhood. If people living in that neighborhood buy a home and have kids, people move into the neighborhood, people move out of it, and things are going to change. We try to account for that as much as possible. That's one way of looking at how to engineers change the future. It can change the future of just a handful of residents in the city who have a concern with something related to transportation safety at an intersection. But another way of looking at this is transportation involves a lot of technology. And you might think, well, roads don't really have a ton of technology. You're just looking at a roadway or a sidewalk, someone on a bicycle, it's pretty basic. But in order to make things safer, we're using technology. If you put in a traffic signal at an intersection that doesn't have one, there's a lot of technology that needs to be considered of how innovative it can be and how it uses new ways of operating. There's always new innovations going on. And a lot of people might have heard about connected and automated vehicles. That's not necessarily on the roadway side, but that's going to be the path to the future of cars having more features where cars can do more things instead of the driver having to do everything. Eventually, they might be completely driverless. And in that way, there's only so much that someone like I can do, but we can work with people who work in auto manufacturing and technology and electrical engineering and auto mechanics who have a totally different set of training outside of the field of engineering, but are still really important. We have to connect with those people to make sure we understand as cars change and become more elaborate and have more computer technology and devices in them to make sure that they actually operate well, because the transportation industry is really trending towards those driverless vehicles. So on the transportation side, there's tons of ways where engineering in our field really does change the future.
Thank you, Adam. Morgan just asked a question to our students. I love it, Morgan. You're like, let's get engaged them. So in the chat, if you want to respond, Morgan's asked, what type of engineer do you guys want to be? So I would love to hear, you can start throwing that in the chat, telling us the kinds of engineers that you're interested in. If you're like, I don't know that I am, maybe you could say, I'm interested in this. How might engineering intersect with this thing that I'm interested in? And in the meantime, I'm actually going to unmute Kamar Gray. He asked a question and I'm going to give him a chance to ask it himself. So Kamar, I'm unmuting you now. Well, I've asked to unmute. You have to unmute yourself now.
So I like acting and working on technology. So I was wondering, is it possible to take two pathways?
And I think maybe you're talking about majors or minors or something like that. So I think Morgan, maybe you were speaking to that.
I can, sure. So absolutely. First, answer. So there are definitely ways where you can apply two different disciplines or two different interests. I also had a lot of different interest areas before I actually decided on a major at Umbc. Like I knew that I wanted to do engineering, but in terms of like a career, I didn't really know where I was gonna go from there because I like so many different things. Like I said, I like biomedical stuff. I was also interested in like energy. I knew that I wanted to travel. So like I didn't want to just kind of like pigeonhole myself to like a desk job. So if there's something that you want to do that you think that you could make into a career, do research. There are plenty of people that you can find either on LinkedIn. For example, my sister, she's interested in theater and arts and movies. So what she's been doing recently is like she will watch her favorite movies. And then there's like the long list of credits that, they have everyone's name of like, oh, this was a studio engineer or this was like a lighting person. And she'll like Facebook stalk the crap out of them or like, Google them and see where what information she can find. So if there's something that you want to do and like, you kind of know the direction, see what you can find online. Like if this person is, in your field, reach out to them and say like, hey, I really think that I want to do something with these two combination skills. Do you think that you have any suggestions on how I can go about this, or what I should major in, or even like what skills I should start obtaining so that I can kind of combine these two things together, so that you're in a better position to go about that moving forward, and that you're packaging yourself to kind of frame your ideal goal of what you want to do. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
We had another couple of one student said, I'm interested in psychology and art. So again, looking for that intersection between engineering and art. And then maybe some of you can speak to this. I never realized that, like, I'm more of a humanities type person, right? Human resources, but like they got human resources folks at Northrop Grumman, right? And, so that matters too, that there are these organizations that aren't necessarily associated with more broadly with like my field, but these big companies, they employ lawyers, they employ event planners and things like that. So there's a way to, if like I'm interested in engineering, but I don't know that it's something that I'm like super, super good at, maybe I can be like almost an engineer. I can be an engineer by proxy, right? Pushkar, we haven't heard from you in a while. Can you take a look at those questions? Is there one in particular you would want to speak to? And then we're actually I'll have a little announcement that I want to make to students and give them a couple choices.
I was thinking answering question B, and I'm glad that some folks have mentioned that they may not be necessarily thinking about engineering as their career choice, and that's perfectly fine. And you can still be involved, and these discussions that we're having could be still helpful to you, because you would might end up working for an engineering oriented organization, a company, or a public sector where you may not be an engineer, but the knowledge of engineering and what it does really will help you to do your job. So to answer your question in class, like I think engineers work in a group, and who choose engineers to work in a project. And I based on my own experience, I actually worked for about 15 years for Maryland Department of Transportation. And so it's a pretty large organization, has basically takes care of all the transportation modes in Maryland, which includes the rail system, the highways, the airports, the port in Baltimore, the bus system, and so everything pretty much falls under it. And during my career, I had worked with accountants. I worked with historians. I was talking about my love of history during my high school days. So I worked with archaeologists who, are basically master's, PhDs, and bachelor's degrees in history. And they do work alongside with engineers to figure out, how our projects impact old habitats, like where people actually used to live, and they have things that are buried underground. How we protect them, how do we preserve them, how do we really celebrate our history. I think somebody mentioned about their psychology and love for psychology and arts. We work with psychologists and traffic engineers. We try to figure out why people make certain driving decisions. So we have driver simulators we work with, where we would invite people to test driving in a driving simulator, where different people from different society, parts of the society would test it out, and all react different ways because you all are different. So and we learn from those sort of trends. So the knowledge of psychology comes, the education comes very handy for engineers to figure out, how whatever things that we're designing or coming up with, how it's going to be used by different people. So I don't know if I answered. I think the question B is, how do you choose? Who selects who to be in that part of the team? And I think Elwood had previously answered these questions, and I would say the same thing. When it comes on a project, we basically determine what kind of skill sets we need for that project, and the team that is formed, everybody comes with a different skill set and different background. So the diversity actually helps the project team to develop a product that's is the best value that covers the most of the potential uses of that design. Like Morgan was mentioning before, like when she was working on the project that she was working on, that I'm sure that those 3 people or 4 people that she worked with had different perspectives and different backgrounds and ideas that all kind of culminated into the product that she finally was part of, creating. So, and it's pretty creative. Engineering is very creative, a field of a career choice. And I would conclude by saying that more time is passing in the future, you will see not as much of a differentiation between medical science and engineering and other non-science like humanities field. All will work together because even engineering, there were core engineering fields, and now there are so many other applied science and applied engineering fields. As more time passes, we are learning that we need to really share our knowledge between different fields and learn from each other. And that's how I will conclude. So good luck. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pushkar. So originally, just to some housekeeping really quickly, originally in our sessions, we were going to be moving to 2 different sessions, but because of when we started, we are going to stay in this session. The one exception to that, so I'd encourage you, students, don't go hopping into other sessions. They're sort of like, mid-sentence. It's probably better for you to deepen your understanding of this first session than to jump someplace else. The only exception I'll say is if you are a senior and when Mr. Greg from Grads to Careers talked a little bit about Grads to Careers. If you know that you are interested in a training program, if you're interested in nursing, if you're interested in construction or any of the other pathways that he mentioned, if you're like not certain what happens next and you are a senior and you would like to pop over to the Grads to Career session, that's the only exception to this. So if you are a senior and you're in this session and you have not had a chance to go over to the Grads to Career session, I would encourage you to go and to connect with Greg. Even if he's like mid-sentence and you've missed some things, just hang out there. He is like one of the best humans of all time, and he will not just help you get where you need to go and spend time with you, but he is a real valuable resource that would help you through the entire process. So if that was at all intriguing to you, if you're not sure what's happening for you next year, you like the idea of being in a supported training program, I would encourage you to go over to the Grads to Career session. But otherwise, you're going to stay with us. Everything you need, you'll get all the information you need. You'll get the exit survey and all of that information. We've got a few things in the chat. First of all, Morgan, thank you for listing out all of those. Right, it's not comprehensive, right? You're just like rattling off the different forms of engineering. Did you say somebody recently said they went to UMBC? Was that you, Morgan? Oh, that was you. Hey, all right. So we know that UMBC is just a fantastic place to, for engineers, right? So
Definitely.
You want to do a quick shout out about that? And then we're going to turn it over to Adam. Go ahead.
So UMBC is a great school. It's actually one of the lesser expensive schools in Maryland. Surprisingly, there's not a lot of people from Baltimore that go to UMBC. I was very disappointed, like, where's everybody at? But it's a great school. I speak very highly about UMBC. I had a wonderful experience there. We only have 3 engineering majors though. Mechanical, computer, and chemical engineering. I know that University of Maryland College Park, which is a little bit further down the road, my sister went there, but they have all of the disciplines for engineering. So they have like aerospace and like civil, industrial. So if you want something that is not at UMBC, you could definitely go there. Also Morgan State, a lot of people from Poly and Western went to Morgan State for engineering. They also have 3 disciplines. They have the other 3 that we don't have. So I think they have like civil, industrial, and electrical. So those are the close schools that I know that offer engineering programs.
Awesome. And just an additional shout out to UMBC. UMBC has like a really vibrant student leadership you know, so there's lots of opportunities for young people to sort of be very engaged, very dynamic president, and also one of the few places that undergraduates can get to do research, right, in a really meaningful way. So there's just a lot of really great things going on at UMBC. So just want to shout that out. We had a student who said that they were interested in ASL and doing sign language interpreting as something that's really important to them. I don't know if if you want to speak to, if any of you have can speak to like the ways that engineering might connect with that interest. But otherwise, Adam, I'm gonna have you go ahead and cue. You can do your screen sharing. He's going to share. Adam's going to share with us some a presentation that just gives you a better sense of some of the opportunities in transportation engineering. And we'll keep an eye on the chat. And once Adam's done sharing, we'll come back to that chat if there's additional questions or conversations that we can have with the students.
Before I share my screen, I did want to make one point on the ASL interpreting, which ties into, you know, sign language or any other language for people who do not have English as their first language. Because civil engineering, whether it's in transportation or in buildings or environmental issues, because it impacts the public, a lot of these projects, we go directly to communities and talk with people, tell them about a planned project, get their input and questions and concerns, which helps us decide what the project is actually going to look like when it's done. Not to guarantee what everyone says can be included, but it helps us, you know, decide what is the best path forward to meet the community's needs. And a lot of communities across Maryland, especially in Baltimore City and in Washington, D.C. and the suburbs outside of both cities, there are a lot of people who are either need ASL assistance or English is not their first language. And so when we go to meet with them, there are folks who are hired by county governments, the City Department of Transportation, the State Department of Transportation, who are communications liaisons, and they work with people either themselves or work with other people who have interpretation skills, and they can come to these public meetings and translate those messages for us. So number one, it makes those people in the communities feel like they're at home. They have someone they can really communicate with in their most comfortable way, and it gives that more direct connection. They're more likely to give us feedback, which really helps us make better decisions on what transportation networks should really look like. So just one quick note there, but I will share my screen talking a little bit about civil engineering in general to start. So if you can see the pictures here, there's 4 photos, all are civil engineering related. There's different specialties within civil engineering. So for example, on the top left, you could go into structural engineering and design buildings like the ones that are in Baltimore City, that's the skyscrapers and housing developments and other businesses. You can design those buildings. Or on the bottom left, that's a picture of the Hoover Dam out in Nevada. That involves structural engineers have to build that concrete that holds all the water back behind it. And we have hydraulics engineers that work on the flow of that water to see how the dam processes that water and turns it into electricity. And you involve non-civil engineers like electrical engineers and power engineers that figure out how to distribute that energy to people in the area. And then on the top right, you could be in either environmental engineering or in water resources. And the example here is you can test local water sources to see, are there pollutants in the water? How clean is it? Does it affect local wildlife? And you can find ways to clean up the water for either local habitats or for communities. And then the one on the bottom right is most closely tied to what Pushkar and I do in transportation. People are using that road, right? There's people in cars, there's people walking on the sidewalks, there's bicycles available. We need to determine what should that roadway look like, who's using it and why, and we find the best way to make that roadway meet everyone's needs. So that's another specialty in civil engineering. But looking at transportation a little bit more closely, there's different ways you can be involved in the transportation industry, in engineering, or even not in engineering. On the engineering side, you can build that, you can design that roundabout. You can look at information, crunch the numbers, and put together a roundabout and work with a construction crew that makes sure it gets out there. Or on the other side of that, you can actually be on the construction crew and actually build it. So you're working with those engineers, but you're out in the field putting everything out there. Or if we're not just looking at designing or constructing something, a big part of the transportation industry, especially during the pandemic, is trucking. While we're all not able to go to school all the time, we're not going to work, we can't do the same things that we used to do with shopping and entertainment, we still have to get stuff to our homes so we can live on a day-to-day basis with food and services and goods. And the trucking industry is huge. You can become a long-haul truck driver. People really rely on them. They do trips around the region, cross-country, there's special training programs, and they really serve a lot of people, and they're really key part of transportation. Something a little bit different, still really key to transportation, and actually people who Pushkar and I both worked with very closely when we worked for the state DOT, our maintenance crews. Doesn't require an engineering degree, but engineers work with these folks. So either whether you're on the engineering side or you want to pursue a different path, you can have a direct impact on what the transportation network looks like. The one photo on the top left, there's people who have materials that are laying out those markings on the roadway. They have to have specialized training on how to apply these markings because sometimes they apply a lot of heat and essentially melting them to the road. The engineer has to come up with where that marking is going to be, how big it's going to be, and work with the maintenance crews to make sure it's installed correctly. And then something a little bit different on the bottom right, which is actually an example in Maryland of technicians that work on signals, traffic signals, whether it's putting one in or changing the design, or if you have an outage, if the power goes out or there's an electrical malfunction at the signal, it won't control traffic the way it's supposed to. So you can do specialized training to become a signal maintenance technician and actually fix those problems when they come about. And unfortunately, they happen more often than we'd like. So we rely on the large crew of signal maintenance technicians around Maryland to try to resolve those problems as quickly as possible because it impacts the safety of everyone who uses those roads. And a couple of others you might not think of, but still important. One might be more obvious. The photo on the bottom left is of the Baltimore Metro. You can train to be a train conductor, whether it's in the Baltimore Metro, you can be a Metro driver for WMATA, you can train to be a certified bus driver for one of them. And then on the top right is some of the most crucial service, at least from the state's Department of Transportation perspective, where you can help people meet their basic transportation needs, helping them get their driver's licenses. You can do driver's license testing and processing forms for people so they can have ways to legally get around, whether it's just driving a car, getting help training riding a bike, or if you're using the toll roads around the state, you can help people get those easy passes, that transponder in your car that helps you electronically process those tolls. People have to sign up for them somewhere, and whether it's online and you help them fill out those forms online, or when it's safe to do so, they go into an MVA location or a toll authority office and they sign up for that easy pass. You can work directly with them and help them get on their way. So just a couple of ideas of whether or not you're considering engineering, but you want to be involved in transportation. There's lots of different fields, generally with civil, engineering specifically in transportation, and then also if you want to be have an impact on transportation, but are thinking about somewhat of a different path, there's lots of different opportunities.
Awesome. So just a reminder, students, we would love for you to type your question in the chat. We may invite you to ask it yourself. Thank you so much for all those different visuals so that we could kind of picture the different ways that students could be civil engineers. So there's opportunities outside, if that's your jam. There's opportunities where like, I'm just going to design from here, and then others can go outside, right? So like there's lots of different ways that you can be an engineer. We have about 5 minutes before we're going to pivot to the exit survey and then the sort of like what's next for students. And a question I always really like to ask, because I like it when it's asked of me, is if you are going to give some advice to your like junior, senior self, right? Or to yourself your first year in college, right at that critical transition, you know, because being a young person is sort of about being in transition perpetually. What advice do you wish you could have, you know, if you could have mentored yourself? What's some advice you would have given to yourself? It could be professional, right? Thinking about your professional path that you're now in. It could be more personal. So I would love if our speakers could speak to that. And then again, remember students that we would love to hear your questions based on their responses or anything they've shared before. Any of our speakers want to hop in? They're afraid that I'm now going to unmute them if they answer questions, but anyone want to speak to what advice you would give your transitioning self?
That's such a loaded question. There's so much. I think that one of the best things that I could say for someone that is transitioning from college or high school to college is really to just invest in yourself. Just because when you're in high school, you often feel like you're or at least when I was in high school, I often felt like I was just performing to just like get the grade done, get through the class, get my teachers off my back, and I did well in high school, but it wasn't really just because I wanted to do well for myself, or like I really wanted to learn the material and really be, very specifically knowledgeable about the information that we were being presented in school. So when you get to college and even just in your life, like this is just a good life skill, really invest in whatever you're doing, do it full out and do it because you want to do it and you want to be successful at it and do well with it. Not because someone's telling you like, oh, you have to learn this math or like you have to learn, fill in the blank. But say like, I want to be good at this because when someone asks me about it, I want to say like, yeah, I, got that skill mastered. Like I have it down packed. And even if it's for like a short period of like getting through the semester, it really gives you a great confidence boost because it's like, yeah, I got that. I understood it. And I just knocked it out the park. And then it also gives you the bragging rights to say like you did it. And, it really helps you to kind of dig in deep and say like, I can learn anything that I really put my mind to learning and doing. So it kind of just gives you good practice with like just determination of getting through something for yourself and not to meet some sort of superficial goal of like a grade. And I think that's probably the best like blanket advice because that applies to just so many different things.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Yeah, giving yourself permission that like, hey, I can be the expert on myself, right? And I can pursue what is my greatest purpose.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead, Elwood. It's all you.
Yes, I want to piggyback on what. Sorry, I want to piggyback on what. So like I said, I want to piggyback in terms of the transition. I think that school to college, it's all about you stepping up and doing well and being successful. But one of the biggest things is that regardless of why your parents are pushing you, at the end of the day, if you want to do well in life, you're only benefiting yourself to put your best foot forward in as many cases as you can, learn as many skills as you can, master as many skills as you can, because when you get later on in life, everything that you mastered from the previous stage, you might think that this is crazy or not worth my time. That your thought process is just. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
No one can hear me.
We can. You're getting really, really slow, and then it's what you're saying is catching up to itself. So I don't know if you're in a space where it's just a little bit harder for us to get you, but I heard it. Like, we were investing in ourselves, and that investment's going to matter. It's going to pay off. We were with you. We were slow when you were slow, and we sped up with you, and we were keeping pace. So keep going.
Okay, is this
That's a little better. Yes.
Better.
Yeah.
a little better? Okay.
Yes.
So like I said, I was just saying that the investment that you make in yourself is really going to count later. As every skill that you master, you're going to realize that your thought process is just going to be way more advanced. And in the competitive world that we are in today, not only is it just you being able to go and do great things when you're later, you just don't realize that you might realize it's something that you want to do as you're applying yourself. And if you don't give yourself the best shot to do as well in as many areas as you can, you're just limiting
We're losing you again, unfortunately, Elwood. But you're losing.
Right? And there's no reason to do that when you have the opportunity to do your best, right? So that's, oh man, oh wow.
It's all right. Well, we got you. And I'm hearing.
Tried.
You
Okay.
Believe me.
Well, I tried.
Had ample testament this morning of how technology can get in the way of the message, but we heard you, and
Okay.
I think it's a really helpful one because, again, humanities. So like when I was like, why do I need math? It's like, well, because it strengthens your brain, right? And so every lesson, even if you don't know what the immediate application is, you're building skills, you're building strength, you're building capacity for that thing, that ultimate thing, when you find your ultimate thing so that you can invest in it. So thank you so much. So we have a couple minutes. I would love for Adam or Pushkar to speak to that question. If there was something you are going to advice you're going to give to yourself during a transition. And Elwood, thank you for reminding us that we also transition out of college and into the workforce. So there's other things that we have to be aware of. And then we are going to post that survey. So students, don't hop off before we post that exit survey, because that's both how you give us feedback, how you connect with us, and then also how we know that you attended. So please make sure that you wait around for that. Pushkar or Adam, any advice to your past self?
I'll defer to Pushkar if you want to. It looked like you unmuted, but I'm happy to speak. Either way is okay with me. Okay. Okay. Real quick point. Engineering is challenging. I'm not going to lie. It's not easy. Math and science are hard. Engineering is hard, but it pales in comparison to the importance and challenges of learning to be a good communicator. If you're in high school and you have more confidence in your communication with your teachers, not to say your grade's going to change, but sometimes you get more information out of them and you end up learning more. It depends, and then when you're in college and you're learning more advanced topics in engineering, also in math and science or humanities, regardless of what it is, the better you can communicate with your classmates, you get more out of that work, and with your professors, you can get more information out of them. It helps you just continue to grow more. When you get into the working world, whether it's communicating with coworkers or especially on our side on these public works projects and transportation, when you're meeting with communities, communication is so important. It really makes a huge difference where you can better relay a message to someone so they better understand it. You can relate to different types of people. You can think of new ideas for a project and you never know what's going to happen. But when you're confident in your communication, whether it's in writing, speaking, or especially listening, it's still a form of communication, is listening. When you're active and you hear what people say and you process it and you do something with it, that's when this, engineering work really can become rewarding and successful.
Awesome, really good advice. And he's not saying your grade will change, but it could, like you have a relationship with someone, they want to help you out, and you can't build that relationship without communication. Thank you, Adam. Pushkar, any advice you would offer yourself as a young person in transition?
I see some really younger folks there from 8th grade even, 9th. So I remember back in the days when I just started high school, I was not good in math and science. I was okay. I was not good. And I remember one thing really helped me is my peers, my students, other students who are my friends, who really motivated me to do well. So areas where I was not so strong, they actually helped me. So having good friends, strong friends who are also very much career oriented, they're really motivated to do well. Having those good friends is very key. And the other thing is, Adam already mentioned about communication, and I had a very good communication with my teachers. So I had no problem seeking out help from my teachers, like go to the teacher saying, I'm struggling with this part of math, or I'm struggling with this science. Could you please help me? And there is, even when during COVID, like we had online classes, the teachers are working extra hard to help students out. So I think do not hesitate to reach out to your students, try to seek that assistance and help. Wherever you can find assistance, look for it. You have to engage, like I guess Elwood said, like you have to invest in yourself. And once you invest in yourself, the reward will come. And it's just a matter of that believing in yourself and pursuing and not giving up no matter what. So that's what it is.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And that brings us back to really Mr. Jones and what he said in the original session about building your network, right? So this has been an opportunity. We had to navigate some challenges, right? Like you had to, the link's not working. Let me check back. Is it working now? Let me call somebody else, navigating those challenges as a form of